Hello and welcome to another Friday Functions video. In this particular video, we're going to talk about how to create checkboxes as well as how to select those checkboxes and push the selections into a single line of text on SharePoint. So we're going to be using SharePoint and Power Apps together, and we're going to do a customized form. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a bunch of checkboxes and then based on what people select, to merge the selections into a single text field. This can be helpful when you want to change maybe the way they're experiencing a multi-select situation, or when you want to model the data later and you want to split that data out later. Next week, I'll show you the flow that sits behind this solution that will actually split that title field and put them into separate lists for data analytics. But for today, let's do two things. Let's create our checkboxes and let's push the selections into a single line of text. Okay, so on SharePoint, I have two lists. I have a list with fruits, and you've seen this list before. We're just going to use the name of the fruit as our checkbox items. And then I have another list, which is called liked fruits, where I will take all the selections from that particular checkbox list scenario and push them into a single line of text. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I don't have any already customized forms in here. So I'm going to go into my list settings, and I'm going to go into my form settings, and I'm going to make sure that this is set to the standard SharePoint form. Notice that when I do that, any other forms I can delete if I want to. And so I want to start from scratch. And so we're going to go back to the standard form, and we're going to get rid of any forms that existed before that were customized. And you do that in your settings under form settings. Now that I'm all ready to get started, let's go ahead and start by building our app. Now, I will tell you that normally what I will do before I build an app is I will make sure I have at least one line of data in my list. And this will just help me configure better because I'll be able to see what the data will look like in my app. Now, notice I have two semicolons here, so I'm going to take that out. And now I have some data that I can at least use to see how everything looks in my app. So I'm going to go ahead and do customize forms, because I want a single page app for forms. And we're going to go ahead and create that app. Now, as usual, we're going to watch while Power Apps builds the scenario. In this case, it's going to be setting up SharePoint integration in our app, and it will be building a single page or single screen app with several functions and formulas that will automatically be pre-built for me. In Power Apps, I love that we'll also get a lot of built-in layouts that we can reuse and add screens to our customized forms if we need to. In this case, we're just going to need one screen for this particular demo, but I bet you'll come up with a ton of ideas for how to use this scenario in your business. So we'll just give Power Apps a minute to set up our form for us, and now we can see the canvas, which means that we're almost done. And usually once this gets done, the first thing most of us do is kind of check and see, are the right fields on the form? So you'll get a pop-up that actually gives you the option to just click add or remove fields in a form, which will open up the panel where you can remove or add additional fields from the SharePoint schema. In this particular case, I don't need any of these fields except title, because that's where I'm going to push the data in from the checkboxes, and that's also where I'm going to save the data. I'm also going to resize this form because I don't need as much space because it's just one field. And I'm going to put it up here at the top. All right. Now, before I get started with this, one thing I do want to do is take the data that is in the SharePoint list right now and save it into a variable that we're going to use today a lot. What I have done in a PowerPoint slide is I've kind of outlined the controls that we're going to use today, and I'll be sharing those controls with you as we go through this. But if you notice here, I'm going to pull over the PowerPoint so you can see it. If you notice in my PowerPoint, I am using a variable called DeliminatedList. And this is a variable that I just made up off the top of my head. You can call it whatever you want. The reason I'm calling it DeliminatedList is because I remember comma delimited formats back in the day. But you can call this variable anything you want. When you use the set function, which is a global variable, it will actually set the variable to the name that you select, and that's what comes right before the comma, okay? So we're actually going to start by setting that, and none of this is actually here on this slide, but we're going to do that together. I'm actually going to use a button to do this. I could definitely use OnStart as well, but I want to provoke it right here. And with OnStart, what happens is I have to close and reopen the app to use OnStart. So I'm going to use this button for today. And in this button, I'm just going to set that variable DeliminatedList to be the SharePoint integration. Now, here is a really important point that you will enjoy learning. SharePoint integration is what gives us the entire record from the list form item that we were on. So again, we're customizing a form, so it's always related to, when a form opens, it's related to a list item, a single record in the SharePoint list. So when we use the function SharePoint integration, or when we use the command SharePoint integration right here, what we're saying is, let me get anything that's selected in that one record that they opened this form from. And so after I type selected and dot, you'll see I get all of the schema that is associated with that particular record. And what I'm going to do is take the title. And now what I've done is I've made a global variable that is holding the total contents of this title field in a variable. And we're going to be using this variable quite a bit during this demo. So that's why it's important that we get it. Now I'm just going to run the app and then click that button. And now because I've clicked that button, we now have a new variable. If I go back to the File menu and then I click on Variables, you'll see that we have a new global variable, and that variable is right there, okay? So we can see it. Now, it contains this. So I'm actually going to, instead of having this be parent default, because I want to see what's going on while I'm working in my form, I'm actually going to reset this by unlocking it and changing this to that variable, DeliminatedList. Now, it will look exactly the same because the variable matches what's on SharePoint right now. But as we manipulate this, you'll see that that variable will change. Okay, now let's make our checkboxes, all right? So I'm going to add another data source, of course, because we only have the one that we drove this customized form from. I'm going to add another list. Now, remember, you can add lists from anywhere, not just the current site where you're working. You can add a list from a different site collection altogether so that you can manipulate data from anywhere in your tenant. So this is an advantage over, say, when we used to use SharePoint Designer for many different things. It was restricted to the site. In this case, we can get any site we'd like. And so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get that list of fruits from the fruit list and hit connect. Now that I have fruits in my data, I can add the fruit to my page, to my screen. So I'm going to go to the gallery section and I'm going to add a blank vertical gallery item and move that down beneath the title, because this is where my checkboxes are going to live, right here. Now, there's no data in here, but I can go ahead and connect it to fruits because we do want that data. We still don't see anything, and that's because we added a blank gallery, so there's no controls in here. So let's go ahead and add a control. In this case, we want the checkbox control. So I just hit the pencil icon first, and then I selected the checkbox control. Now, as soon as I add the control, you'll notice that the text property appears at the top. And it defaults to a hard-coded option as a word. What we're going to do is replace that with the name of the fruit by doing ThisItem.Fruit. And now we ThisItem.Title, sorry, is the title column in the list. All right, so now we see our fruit. I'm going to do a little bit of alignment here. So I'm going to align left, I'm going to align top, and then another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the wrap of my form. So I'm going to click on my form in my navigation over here. Then I'm going to click on my gallery, which is what I want to change actually. I'm going to rename this gallery fruits. So now I know where my fruits are. And then I'm going to set the wrap count to 2. This will give me 2 columns for my fruits. And now I'm going to just make my template a little smaller so it doesn't take up as much space, and bang, we have all of our check boxes that we need for our user interaction, okay? And you can line it up any way you want to make that look the way you like. Now we're going to wire this up so that when I click on the checkbox, it's going to add it to this, it's going to add it to the global variable, which therefore will be used to update SharePoint. And I know that because if I click on the card in the form and I go to the update property, you'll see that whatever is in data card value 1, right, which happens to be this control right here, is what's going to update SharePoint. So right now we have that defaulted to DeliminatedList, and what we're going to do is now change that variable based on what they click on. So we're going to go back to our PowerPoint for a minute and grab our OnClick event. Now it's really cool that we have for every checkbox an OnClick property and an OnUncheck property, right? So let's go ahead and get the OnClick property. Now before I do that, before I do that, let's start by doing this first. Now this particular condition down here is actually going to make sure that the items that have already been selected are checked so that they can see that in the list of checkboxes. So what I'm going to do is go into my control that is checkbox 1, and let me just size that a little better. And I'm going to, in this area up here, I'm going to choose the default, because the default for a checkbox is true or false. True meaning checked, and false meaning not checked. So by default, all of our checkboxes are unchecked. So what I want to say here is if this item title is found in SharePoint Integration Selected Title, or what they've already selected, then check it. Otherwise, don't check it, right? So because of that simple formula, you'll see that now we have checkboxes wherever that there is data on SharePoint. Easy peasy. Now we need to create that interactivity. So let's go back to getting our OnCheck formula. So I'm going to select this, and all of these will be in the description of the video. And I'm going to, again, make sure I have the checkbox, because that's the control we're going to be working with. We need to make sure that we don't select something else, but we're selecting the checkbox. And then now we're going to go to the OnCheck property. So whatever I put in here is going to happen when I check a checkbox item. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here, set that list to be whatever is in that list, plus a semicolon, plus the title. So basically, we're just adding to our existing global variable a semicolon and whatever the title is on that control. All right, really easy peasy, right? So now I'm going to check that by running the app and hitting apricot. Notice that we instantly got apricot added to our title control and in the delimited list. Okay, now what if I uncheck that, right? What should happen? The semicolon and the fruit should come out, right? Because now we've unchecked it. So we're going to go back and we're going to grab this OnCheck property. Now I think I wanted to add something to this. Let me see if I can. What I'm going to add, and we'll do this in Power Apps so that we don't get any curly quotes. I'm going to take this condition and I'm going to bring this in and put this, again, selecting the checkbox as the control I'm working with. I'm going to go to the OnUncheck property, because this is what will happen when they uncheck something. And I'm going to paste this complicated, not too complicated, but a little bit longer kind of a function in here. And let's look at it up close together. Now this function right here, find, is kind of important in this case. I'm going to kind of look at that up close in PowerPoint so you can see this better. So if you notice that the black text here, find delimited list, this item title, this is a function in itself. And the find function, what it does is it goes and looks for a string inside another string, and it returns back where that string sits in that first string. So if Washington was our delimited list, in this case, when I say find, let's use Washington as a word. If I say find in Washington ton, T-O-N, the return value will be 8 because the T-O-N is at the 8th position in this string. However, if I say find Washington, S-I, I'm going to get back 0 because S-I is nowhere in that string together as a team. So what we're doing here is we're saying find in our current string the title of the option that we've clicked. If it's not there, right? So it's not there, then go ahead and do what we did before. Add it, right? It's assuming that, maybe they're just clicking and they just need to add it. But if it is there, right? This means they've unchecked it. Then I'd like you to do a substitution. And we've seen this formula before in one of my previous Friday Functions videos. What substitute does is it takes a string and then says, okay, this string that follows that string should be replaced with what's in these quotes, right? And you can tell I didn't put anything in the quotes, so it's just going to replace it with nothing. So therefore removing title from the string. Okay, with that thought in mind, I wanted to make one change here, and that is instead of substituting just the title, I also want to substitute the semicolon that is sitting in front of the title. And I think this will work. And all I'm doing is saying put together the semicolon and the title and then replace those with nothing. Let's give it a try, right? So we're going to go ahead and now we're going to uncheck apricot. And wonderful, it went away. All right, so basically that's really all you need to know here, to take a checkbox and use it as a way to add items to the list or to remove the items from that string. And then when you save this in your list, it will automatically update your SharePoint list. So let's go back to SharePoint. We're all done. We're going to save and publish. And this is going to take us all the way back to SharePoint, right? Don't have to worry about sharing because it inherits the permissions of the list. Anyone who can see the list will be able to see my custom form. And anyone who has structural editing rights will be able to edit the form as well. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to do a quick refresh because I've been like dead on this page for a while. And I'm going to hit this and choose edit. Now, when I do that, you're going to see our new form that will pop up that contains those checkboxes. And those checkboxes, if you remember, came from a different list that could be in any SharePoint site or another database or another software as a service, right? These checkboxes can come from anywhere. As long as we have tabular data, we can easily add them to a gallery and create these checkboxes. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click the Set button to pull that, to pull the text into that field, right? Now, I could have done that on visible. That way it would happen automatically. But I wanted you to see that because we set that title to be the variable doesn't live really until we open the app. So I need to go ahead and just make sure it pops up there. So I set it. And then if we go ahead and add avocado here, and we add peaches, and then we say, oh no, we didn't want avocado, we'll take avocado away. and then we'll save, and now you'll notice that now we have peaches in our app, in our item. Very easy to do. Give it a try. I'm sure you'll think of a lot of creative ways to use this. And I look forward to our next Friday Functions video. Have a great weekend.